Hello and welcome back to my retouching series. In this video, I want to talk to you about something that's very important, and those are tablets. Now, I already have a video on tablets, so you can go and check that out, but I wanted to revisit this topic definitely for this series, and also because I want to show you some additional troubleshooting tips when it comes to tablets. Why do you need a tablet for retouching? Can you not do retouching without a tablet? You certainly can. You can use your mouse. You can use a touchpad. I've done that in the past, unfortunately, when I was on holiday and I had to do something very urgent. So those things are possible and feasible, but that doesn't mean that that's the way that you should do these things, right? If you can't afford a tablet, that's all fine. Just work with the mouse. Or if you don't want a tablet for some reason, you can still work with the mouse. However, I highly recommend everyone who wants to do serious professional retouching to get a tablet. Additionally, a tablet is much better for your wrists. Just imagine it, you would be working on your computer, retouching for extended amount, and sometimes doing some very small, strenuous movements. You don't really want to do that with a mouse. It's much more natural for your wrists, and it's much healthier to use a tablet. Now that we established that, let's talk about what kind of a tablet I'm referring to, because this can cause some sort of confusion sometimes with people, and I get many questions about which tablet to choose. We are fortunate enough that there are a vast amount of tablets and brands that we can choose from. So let's start with the brand. Is there any particular brand that we need to look for? I don't think so. When I started doing retouching, you needed to get a Wacom tablet because otherwise everything else was like laggy, nothing was precise, they were all over the place, and we all trusted Wacom. However, that's not the case anymore. We still trust Wacom, that's not what I'm talking about, but there are thankfully other brands that you can choose from, sometimes more economical, and even the quality, the build quality and everything else is still the same. So why not just choose something else? I have Wacom tablets. I've always had Wacom tablets. I know how to use them. I'm very familiar with them. Fair warning is what I'm saying. That's the industry standard, but that doesn't mean that that's what you have to go with. Just go with the brand that you can afford and that's something that you can trust. Now, one thing that's very important is for your tablet to not lag. So if you pick a tablet out and it lags, then just return it and keep doing that until you get to a tablet that doesn't lag for you. That's very important. The resolution, the tilting, the pressure sensitivity, those things are not as important for retouching as they are maybe for drawing or something else. So the most important part here is not to have your tablet be laggy. The second thing to consider is size. People usually think that bigger is better, but I don't think that's the case when it comes to tablets. I believe, and if you watch my other video, that I think I come to the same conclusion: the smaller, the better. You will be doing very small movements, you will be doing big movements, you will be doing many movements after one another during a day when you do retouching. And because of that, you want to minimize the energy you have to put into your movements. You need to minimize the movements themselves. And the only way that you can do that is if you get a smaller tablet. Let me demonstrate. And this is the example I use all the time. So here is the tablet, right? The bigger the tablet, the bigger movements you need to make in order to get from one corner to the other, because the tablet directly actually translates to your monitor. So whatever is here is actually on the same spot on your monitor. It's not like a mouse. So you're not just like dragging it and re-dragging it, and that's how you get from A to B. It's actually, if you touch it here, that's going to correspond to the same point on your monitor. If you touch it here, that's going to be the same point. So essentially, just imagine like using your hand and just pointing on your monitor at certain places. That's how a tablet works, right? So because of that, I always say, get the smaller one. That's all fine. It's easy to travel with and doesn't really take up too much space on your desk. So these things are quite important. Now, the last thing that I'm going to mention is the type of tablet, right? There are display tablets and there are these, what I would call regular tablets. Now, display tablets have like a monitor built in, and they are very, very useful for drawing or 3D work or painting or any of those things. However, for retouching, I don't think that they are very beneficial, because during retouching, we essentially trace over previous lines and previous shapes. Because we are retouching over an image, we want to see what it is that we are working on, and that could be just a pixel or 3 pixels or 5 pixels, so very small areas. If you're drawing on a display tablet, your hand might be in the way, so you want to minimize that. You want to use a regular tablet for that reason. And also, it's much cheaper. You don't actually have to pay so much money just to get a display tablet and get started with retouching. You can just get a regular tablet, and that will be good to go for the rest of your career. I've never actually had a tablet break on me. I only like switched to new ones because I thought that they were old and I just wanted a new one. There was no other reason most of the time. So they will last. That's also quite good. The tablet that I showed you is a Wacom Intuos Pro Medium, if I'm correct. Now, you might be thinking, I have a medium and I talk about getting, that you should get a small one. What does that mean? Well, the reason I have a medium is because the new versions of the Wacom tablets are actually much smaller. I'm so used to having my arm in a certain position, actually on the tablet, that I wanted to get the medium so that I can continue that tradition of mine. I actually have my old one here so that I can show it to you. So I just put it in the box of the previous one. Let me just open this. So here, if I hold this up, you can see, hopefully you can see this, that it actually is almost the same size as the medium one, and this used to be the small one. It just had like a larger a border or bezel or however you want to call it. But that's what I used to use. Now the current one is the medium, and I feel like that's kind of the same size. But whichever you can afford, whichever you can get, just make sure it doesn't lag. That's it. Nothing else matters. And actually, it doesn't even matter that much whether it's wireless or wired. Don't get me wrong, I love wireless. I don't really want to see many wires on my desk. However, I'm still using actually my tablet most of the times with a wire. I don't actually know if you can see this, but I most of the times use this with a wire because of interference. Sometimes what happens is that I use my tablet and it just works weirdly. And I suspect it's because of my other wireless equipment and bits and pieces that I have on my desk, like my mouse, and they could be interfering. And in those cases, I just plug it in because I have to continue working, right? I can't just stop because there is some interference somehow. So don't even have to care about whether it's wireless or not, because there will be problems with that. This is troubleshooting number 1. If it works weirdly, but it still works, plug it in. That's the first thing that you want to do. Okay, let's go to the computer now. All right, so I have Photoshop open here, and I also have my Wacom tablet connected. Let's just open a new... This is the old legacy one that we set up the previous video. Let's just open a very simple 500 by 500 canvas here, right? All right, I'm just going to grab a brush. Here is actually a pencil. I need a brush. So here's a brush. Let's go into the settings, and where you will find the pen pressure settings is actually in shape dynamics. So if you click on shape dynamics, it's inside brush settings. You can actually use the control drop down and just switch to pen pressure. Now, everything is quite fresh here, so hopefully I can simulate the first problem that you will encounter. I am using my tablet and drawing here, right? So let's just draw small. Well, first thing is it's kind of laggy, but that can happen because of my recording. It could happen for many reasons. That's not what I want to point at here. The problem here is that I'm varying my pressure here, and still nothing really happens. I get the same exact width to my stroke, which is odd because I put it on pen pressure. So what's going on? Let me try to very barely touch it. Still, it's the same pen pressure. Now, this is a common problem on Windows, as far as I know. I don't think it's a problem on the Mac, but please, if I'm wrong, just correct me in the comment section and try to offer some solutions. But as far as I'm concerned, this is a Windows problem. So what you want to do, it's very weird, but what you want to do is you want to open your file explorer or anything that you use to explore your files and go to, let me just make this wider. You should go to this PC, whichever disk that you use for Windows, users, your name, your user, app data, roaming Adobe Photoshop 2024, and Adobe Photoshop 2024 settings. 2024, of course, is my version. So whenever you're watching this, go to your version. And inside settings, you should create a PSUserConfig.txt file. Okay. And here is what you should put inside that file and just save it inside the settings. All right. So after you save that, and I have this mine here. I just renamed this. So let me just like rename it back. I can close this. So close Photoshop. I don't need to save this. And then you can reopen Photoshop after that. All right, so Photoshop is open. I'm just going to create another new document here. Let me just zoom in just like before, creating this, like switching to my brush, going into shape dynamics, making sure that there is the pen pressure. Let's see if I can draw. Oh, look at that. So I can vary the width of the line now, right? By the way, I think because it's lagging, it's because of the smoothing. Yes, okay. So it was lagging because I had lazy smoothing on. We'll talk about that in another video. But look at this. So now we can have pen pressure activated. This is very useful, and this is something that we are going to talk about in a future video. This is very useful for painting in hair. So if I want to paint hair strands, you see how I can, as I let go at the end, it just goes into this very thin fading away line. Of course, this doesn't look anything like hair, but we will talk about that later. So we solved this first problem by using the PSUserConfig. One other thing that we also want to do is if you go into your Wacom tablet properties, which looks like this, you can actually go to select the pen, and then in the mapping tab, you should uncheck use Windows ink. That's not something you want to use. While we are at mapping, you can see that I'm using 2 monitors because it's kind of wide here. And if you do the same thing and you always work in Photoshop, what you can actually do is you can minimize, you can limit your screen area. So I can just use my second monitor, or I can use my first monitor. Because if I use both monitors for retouching purposes and I only have Photoshop open in one monitor, which will probably be the case for everyone, imagine that you're using essentially your whole tablet area for 2 monitors. So for Photoshop, you would only use the right or the left side, and you still have area that you can actually use. So why not, while you're inside Photoshop, limit that to a smaller area? You can do that actually by clicking on the plus icon here and just bringing in the right application, and then that will be just settings for the particularly selected application. Now, one thing actually that is good here that's already set, at least with my tablet, is that if I go to functions, the last button here is actually the display toggle, so that will do that for me. So that's why I don't have that set up. By the way, you can see how my Photoshop applications are showing up here. So if I select one, I can have different settings for those applications. Set this up however you want to set up. I don't actually want to talk about this too much. I'm sure that you can navigate this and you can just set this up to your heart's content. Right. Last thing that I actually want to mention here is if you go into the pen tool and you go into the pen tab, what I like to do is that this upper button, because the pen has these 2 buttons, the one that's on top here, I usually set that to right click, and that helps me by changing the size of my brush inside, or the size of my tool inside Photoshop. Because if I close this and I go inside Photoshop and I hover over my tablet, I'm holding down Alt, and I'm right clicking, which is the top button on my pen, and I start dragging without actually touching the surface of the tablet, then you can see how I can actually change the size of my brush. And I can go up and down to change the hardness, and I can go right and left to change the size. Again, we will talk about this later when we talk about tools in Photoshop, but this is something that's very useful, and that's the only thing I recommend from that window to set up as I have. The last troubleshooting thing I want to take a look at, because this is something that has happened to me even on stream, which was quite awkward, and I always thought that I had to restart my computer for, is that sometimes your Wacom driver is not on. Somehow it stops, somehow it doesn't start. Something weird happens to your tablet. The way you can identify that, you can actually drag your pen on the tablet and it works, but it doesn't work as it usually works, and the buttons don't work. So something weird is going on. In those cases, all you have to do, again, this is Windows. I'm going to link an article for this for Mac, but I haven't actually encountered this problem in Mac. Most problems are for Windows for some reason when it comes to the Wacom tablet or any tablet that I've used. So that's what I'm showing here. So you just go into Run, which you can find from your Start menu. You go into Run and you just type in services.msc and then you hit OK. And that will bring up your services, your currently running services, which are basically your drivers or any other services that are currently locally running on your computer. Just scroll down to Wacom. By the way, I'm just blurring this just in case. I have no idea whether this is important or not, but just scroll down to Wacom Professional Service, click on it, and on the left panel you see stop the service and restart the service. Now click on restart, or if you don't have that option, just stop it and then start it again, and that will hopefully start your driver and will make sure that you don't have any weirdness going on with your tablet ever again. I think these are all the troubleshooting things that I wanted to talk about. Before I let you go, there is one important thing that I really want to mention, and that has to do with this little device. So you have the pen, right? You will start using this pen, and this nib is what's going to start, well, disappearing. Because you're scratching the surface of something else, there is some resistance to that, and that's just going to eat your plastic here. But you always have more. It's usually in the holder, the pen holder. So if you go in here and you start opening this, yours might be different if it's in the older version, but if you open this, there is like this holder inside. Again, yours might be a bit different, and then you can change your nibs to a different one or to a new one if you want to, because there are also like these white ones that I don't actually know what they do. They are probably softer or harder, one of those, but I always use the black ones, and that's just it. So just replace that. It also usually comes with, I don't know actually where I have mine, but it usually comes with a device that lets you pull out, it's like a pair of tweezers, you pull out the nib with that. Okay, so you replace that from here and then you're good to go. So that's just it. If you have a question like how frequently you actually have to replace your nibs, I don't really have an exact answer to that. I just replace them when I feel like it, when I feel like they are not up to my standards or something, but they last for quite some time. All right, so I know we are still not at the retouching parts. We are still preparing for those, but it will come soon, so just bear with me. And again, this is just the beginner part of this whole thing. I want you, if you don't know anything about retouching, to be able to get up to speed and learn retouching throughout this course and this series. So hopefully this will be all that you will need to know about tablets. If you have any questions, just comment down below, or if you have any feedback or anything that you want to add to this, comment section, please. Other than that, I just want to mention that this series is made available by my amazing Patreon members. So if you want to support this series, just go to patreon.com/Viktor Fejes. So I hope to see you next time, and thanks so much for watching. Bye bye.